This meeting is being live streamed.
It's coming on?
That's what it said.
Well, welcome. We had some technical issues. I'll tell you, it's been quite the morning. And one of the things I made a mistake on is the spelling of our ReBUILDer guest today, Meg Avey, which is spelled Avey. So Meg, I am so sorry. I got that wrong.
That is so good. It's okay. A lot of people do it.
Yes. Well, I'm so excited that you're with us today. And I just want to give a little introduction. You live in Charlotte, North Carolina, but you grew up like me in Pennsylvania.
Yes, exactly.
And like me, you like to garden.
Absolutely. It's my heart. I love that.
And you also have a heart to help others. And one of your ministries you're involved is Rice and Beans, which is a ministry to feed and clothe those who have issues trying to provide for themselves in Charlotte, North Carolina area.
That's correct. Yeah, I help do the clothing side, and we feed and clothe them twice a week in Charlotte, on the streets of Charlotte. And it's a beautiful ministry.
Yeah, so needed.
Yes.
Well, you've been willing to take the time and share with others your experience with our membership, Rebuild After Divorce. So I'd like to start and just share with people, what was your life like around the time of your divorce?
Thank you for asking, Georgia, and thank you so much for having me here. I was married 37 years to a man who I thought was my soulmate, and we have 3 adult children. Our oldest son, Stephen, is 33. Our middle son, Thomas, is 27. And then our daughter, Mary Catherine, is 26. And actually, my bonus 4th child is our exchange student, Nigel, who came to live with us 12 years ago from China. And he went to school with my kids, and we are his American family. So he's still here in the States, going to college, and he is part of our family. And so we were your typical all-American family, churchgoers, raised the kids in Christian school with a fear of the Lord. Christ was our center. My husband was a deacon of our church. I was highly involved in all ministries. In fact, we were the marriage couple. We were the couple that people used to do retreats and conferences. We taught premarital classes. So, I mean, what could go wrong? Well, the day after our daughter college, this is when I thought, life's new chapter. We're going to retire. We're going to travel. We're going to hopefully have some married family and grandkids, and life was going to be so good. And he met me at our home in the middle of the day when I had come back from helping with the graduation and all. And when he told me he needed a break, a little time out, just 2 weeks. He just needed to get his head straight. It was all business related, had nothing to do with me. And I could tell there was something else going on. I'm very intuitive, Georgia, and I just could sense in my gut that this was bigger than what he was talking about. And he actually went back to work after delivering this news to me, and it left me a crumpled mess on the floor, so broken. I had no words. I had no idea what was going on. And what I did find out quickly is those 2 weeks that he stated ended up being a 2.5-year separation. And in it, the Lord was there. The minute I fell to the floor, he was there. And he was there every step of the way. In fact, let me share with you, right in the very beginning, he gave me a vision. This is probably 2 weeks into the separation. And I'm crying. I mean, I cried buckets of tears. And I know we all did. And I was losing weight and all that. I was just despondent. And he gave me this vision. He said, what you experience is a tsunami. And he goes, when you are in a tsunami, you are completely all turned around. So he showed me the tsunami. We were out on a boat, my family and I, and a tsunami wave hit us, broke the boat apart.
Oh my.
We all threw out. I'm going in and out of the waves. I'm getting beaten up by the waves on the floor of the ocean. And then it pops me back on the beach. And I'm like, what just happened? And the Lord was there with me. And he picked me up and he says, you were hit by a tsunami and I'm with you. I said, Lord, where are my kids? He said, they're out there. I'm with them too. They're hanging on debris and they're going to do their own journey right now, but I'm with them. I said, what about my husband? And he said, he's on his own journey and I'm with him too. But right now I want you to get up because we have a journey to go to. I'm like, Lord, where are we going? And he said, there. And he pointed up to this far away mountain. Okay, I said, type A personality kicking in. I said, let's go. I'm ready. He goes, go through this first. And he pointed to a jungle. And in the jungle, I could see it was dark and it was scary and there was noises. And I said, Lord, I don't want to go that way. He goes, you know, you gotta have to. This is the way we're going. So he took me by the hand and he said, well, before we get started, I want to ask you something. He goes, do you know what causes a tsunami? I said, think back to my 7th grade earth science classes. I went, isn't that when you have an earthquake in the ocean? He goes, that's right. He goes, what causes an earthquake? I said, plate shifting. He said, good, you were a good student. And then he says, what causes the plate to shift? I said, pressure. And he says, I'm going to show you in the course of what's going to happen that if you look behind you, those signs were there, but you didn't see them. And I'm going to make them clearer to you. He said, I'm not telling you it was your fault. The tsunami was not my fault. But what I was blinded to the signs that were bringing us to that moment.
Oh, that's such a story of so many women.
Yeah.
Wow. And what comfort that the Lord gave you that whole vision.
That whole vision. And of course, he said, I'm going to take you to that jungle, Meg, and you're going to want to go your own way. But I need you to stay on this path. I'm like, oh God, I never do my own thing. What are you talking about? We were just 2 steps into that jungle and I was down that path, which so many of us do when we're faced with this type of a situation. I got to learn about it. He's got to change. I got to show him how he needs to change. I got to be a better wife. Yeah. And what God was constantly reminding me is, no, you have to learn a lot and I'm going to bring you there and you're going to be broken. And I'm going to put you back together and you won't be the same person.
You had a
and that's and I know
during that time, even though God gave you that vision.
Well, my fears is here I am middle age. I mean, I'm 66 now. So this happened, I was 64, 63. And I wasn't ready to do all this. I had a husband who took care of all that stuff. And I was ready to relax and enjoy the rest of my life. And so I had to, I stayed in our home that we were living in. And so I'm dealing with the maintenance. He wasn't interested in doing any of that anymore. So I'm dealing with just the day-to-day maintenance of a large home and taking care of the animals and then my kids and then the car, all that stuff that was just easy before because I didn't have to do it. And while I was in my emotions were torn up and I was raw and I was angry and I had so much going on. I just didn't want to do anything. I wanted to stay on my couch and watch Netflix. I didn't want to do anything.
It's exhausting when you're in that situation. You talk about raw emotions. You're depleted physically, mentally, emotionally.
Yes, I was, and that's not who I am. And I found myself so weak in my mind, my heart, everything was just. I was not who I knew I to be. I was completely broken, and that's a very, very scary place to be.
Oh, it is, especially when you were used to being a go-get-it woman type of. Oh, well, how did you find Rebuild after divorce?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. About halfway through my, that's why we're here. Halfway through my separation, I was introduced to Leslie Bernick's Emotionally Destructive Marriage book, underlining every single sentence and word and circling and going, oh, those are the words that now describe where I am. So I heard she was going to speak at a retreat called Call to Peace, and I wanted to go see her. Luckily, it was in the mountains of North Carolina. So I went, and first of all, I'm not getting a divorce. At this point, I did not think I was getting a divorce, so I was separated. And so I was overwhelmed when I walked into that room, Georgia, and saw all the women and the reasons why they were there. And I really truly didn't think there'd be that many people. And I broke down in tears, said, Lord, what's with the men who put us women here? Why it's going on? And it's like, enough with your why questions. You're here to learn. You need to learn. And so that's where I met you. I heard you speak. I laughed still about the time you and and Leslie were up on the stage, and we're wearing the same jacket but different colors. I thought that was hysterical. I like that. But I still thought, as much as your group sounded great, I met some of the rebuilders. You weren't my people yet. You weren't my people because I was not getting a divorce. So fast forward then to the next year retreat. I'm there and I'm volunteering. I'm sitting in the book room, and you're there, of course, again, and I'm meeting some more of your rebuilders. And now your material is my material, and your people are my people, because I had just been told I was getting a divorce. So I said, God already opened the door for me to know these ladies and to see this information. So I signed up, and you sent me the email.
Wow.
And I joined, and I never, ever regretted it. Never regretted it.
I didn't know that whole story. So once you got in Rebuild after divorce, how did you experience the community of women that were part of the group?
Well, as we know, we all have friends who have not walked this journey. And no matter how much you explain it to them, they don't get it. They love you, but they just don't get it. Yeah. So the Lord knew I needed a community. Now, I had found some friends locally who we call ourselves the Sassy Sisters. We've been through the same journey. And so we can call each other up at 3 o'clock in the morning and say nothing, and they know, and they're talking us through it. But the Lord knew I also needed a community where I would learn a lot and come out of my comfort zone and be put back together again and see the different levels of what a divorce does. And that's why I was so drawn to you, Georgia, your sweet demeanor, your gentleness, and the fact you walked this journey right alongside of us, and you have come through it, and you have shown grace and beauty in all of it. You are definitely an example of beauty from ashes. And I wanted that. I didn't want this journey of mine to be without. I wanted there to be a purpose for this pain. And I think the worst thing we can do is to go through a life-changing event and then stay in the bitter, angry section and not move on to where God wants us to be.
Which would be so easy to stay stuck there, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. And then I joined at exactly the same time that I was closing and selling my home and moving into my sweet little bare bones rental that I was living in for the next year. And I know so much was happening that it was like a fire hose of information for me. But it wasn't your delivery. It wasn't what you guys were doing. Is my brain was so overwhelmed with everything. I couldn't accept and absorb everything. Right. So I would go back, and I love your book, Morning Glories, and I would go back and read that over and over again and go over what you taught us. And it was just still, I liken it to the fact that I still wasn't accepting that this was going to be my life. And as much as your information was helping me, I was still holding on to that nugget that, God was going to change him at the very, even though we were divorced. What God showed me is that this man was not the man I needed to be with. And I had to grieve that, which I love your first section is choosing to grieve, because until we grieve the pain, and not only the pain of what happened, but the pain of what is not going to happen, I couldn't let go. And I found out that my ex-husband, through God's bubbling up of truth, that he lived a secret life for years and was filled with adultery and was using our money to support these affairs. And he wasn't willing to change. So God was showing me that was a life that I thought was true, but it was not. And my kids and I lived a great life, but he did not. Yeah. And so he had to bring us out of that. I liken it to when the Israelites left Egypt. They had to leave Pharaoh, and God took them out of Egypt, but it took them 40 years to get Egypt out of them. Right. And for me, that's what I was doing. I had to get my Pharaoh and my Egypt experience out of me in order to move forward into the life that God wanted me to have.
Well, hold that thought for a minute, because I just want to say, if anybody's listening, Meg is where I'm sure so many of us have been, and some of you might be right now. And that is, things we don't absorb where we are. There's a shock. There's a numbness. And like she said, we don't move from that painful place to rebuild overnight. It's a process, and it goes far takes far longer than any of us want to talk about. And you talk about the time of grief. So I just want to say right now, if any of you have any questions or comments for Meg, just type them in the chat and we'll be sure to answer them. But the other thing you, Meg, you talked about is grieving. And I'm doing a workshop if anybody's interested on Thursday, 5 key tips for navigating just that time of grief, because that's only the first step of rebuilding. It's still a way to go. Okay, fast forward, you're now a year later, you're at a totally different place. So you absorbed the reality. What's life like?
Well, life is good. It's different. It's not where I thought I would be, but it's exactly where God wants me to be. And in the journey, especially with you and everything I've learned with Rebuild, I've become a stronger person and able to withstand the emotional abuse arrows that were coming my way. And I'm going to do a little contrast for you all. I mentioned how when he told me he was leaving, he left me in a crumple on the kitchen floor and I was sobbing. Fast forward about 3 years later, I've now been in Rebuild and I've got a lot of good tools and I've got the words, and more importantly, I got God. And whenever I had to interact with my ex-husband, whether it's by speaking like face-to-face or email, even text or phone calls, I always pray, dear Lord, protect and guard my mouth so I don't speak anything but what you want me to say, and hold my hand, because I was raised with 4 brothers on a farm. And I can tell you, we solved a lot of our problems by just whacking each other upside the head. So I had to make sure I didn't do that. And so now we're standing inside of the kitchen of our beautiful custom home that we've now sold, and he's moving out the last of his items. And now I'm standing there a different woman. I'm no longer the broken, confused, devastated lady. I'm a strong woman, a warrior who has been given a lot of wisdom. And he continually tried to emotionally abuse me. And I've learned with this type of personality disorder, they only speak truth when they know it's going to hurt you. And so at the very end of our conversation, I asked him a bunch of questions. I asked him, it's obvious you weren't looking for a reconciliation. Why did you allow this abuse or this separation to go on so long, for 2.5 years? And his response was, I could have stopped it at any time, but I chose not to. Now I can tell you, Georgia, at that moment, God held my hands down by my side and he put his hand over my mouth, because my flesh, I would have probably scratched his eyes out, because the thought of us in such devastation, me and my kids for so long, just tore me up. But God, he whispered in my ears, him what he wanted me to say. And Mike very quietly said, so to allow me to understand, you said that you kept this separation going so long and you could have stopped it at any time, even though you saw us in such pain. And he said, yes. And I said, well, if you ever wonder why you have no relationship with our children, you can think of this moment right now. And now I will ask you to leave. Something I never, ever did before was tell my husband to leave our home. And I did that day. And I did it without emotion. I responded and did not react. I was calm, and I was sure of what was being said. I was saying goodbye to that life completely and saw him for who he was. And God was there with me. And after he left, of course, I fell apart and cried, but God was there with me too. But what a difference. And in that journey, I mean, this is when it talks about God, like it says in Psalm 42, he pulls us out of the mire and he puts us on firm foundation. I would not have had the wisdom and strength to say those words to this man who I was in fear of for so long, without your guidance and your teachings and the community of the rebuilders that we could all sit there and draw from each other and give to each other.
And encourage and support. And you're a perfect example how God used that whole experience, and you surrendered and you walked with him to take your pain. And like you said, you're not the same person. He transformed you through that.
Yeah, I like to think about the heroes of the Bible, who they became heroes because they went through something. And then even David in his Psalm, I mean, I think it's Psalm 13, where after he'd been, tried to be killed so many times and he was being chased, he cried out to the Lord, why is this happening to me? And then at the very end, he says, but I trust you and you have a better path for my life. And that's a hard thing to do. We all want to say we trust, but it's the letting go and allowing God to do the work in us. That's so important.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, there was a comment after 3 years, I thought it would get better, but this sadness is where I'm at. So somebody else is really resonating with where you were. You know, we think that would never happen to us, but so many of us have found ourselves in that desert place.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I have sadness too. I mean, there's days I wake up and I can feel it heavy, and I hate that. And I know what that's going to mean is today's going to be not an easy day. But instead of fighting it, now I know what I can do in spite of it. So I'll go and take the dog for a nice long walk, or I'll go work out. I'll put on some praise music. I'll try to combat that heavy feeling. Because one thing I found out, and I'm going to an amazing counselor now, is as these layers get pulled back of all those things, as we realize the red flags we missed, and we don't want to go down the why didn't I know that thing, is each time we have to heal, that healing requires the wound to be open. And you have to allow that. You have to allow the guts to come out, the blood, the yuck. And in order for that, it takes time. And that's why people who are dealing with marital abuse, and unfortunately, people who don't know about abuse will say, well, if he didn't hit you, you know, what's the big deal? Emotional mental abuse is even harder to heal from, because it's your soul that got damaged, and it was your heart and your mind. It's hard, and it takes time. It takes a long time. There's no time frame. Time frame. Somebody's journey look bigger, longer, or shorter.
And that's one of the things we got to keep telling rebuilders over and over. This is a journey. This is not an overnight process. But it's those layers of grief and the healing. Well, what would you say to somebody who's listening right now, and maybe they're going to think about joining Rebuild after divorce, which opens up soon? To find out the details, go to georgiaschaffer.com/rebuild membership. But what would you say to them if they're thinking, well, I'm not sure right now's the time. Maybe I have to heal more.
Oh, good question. And I totally agree that you may wonder, is this something I need, or do I have to do something like this? And I always say, you know, you have your own choice on how you want your journey to look. I know for myself, and from what I see from people who have joined Rebuild, the journey is yours. It's your personal journey, but it's so much easier when you have other people around you who get it, who you can learn from, who you can grow with, who you can talk to. And you see that you're not isolated, because I think that's what happens when we try to do things on our own. We tend to get a little isolated. And you see this community, and you can ask the questions, and you won't be judged for asking the question. There's no unintelligent questions. They're all questions are good. And then we can celebrate the wins of, I went a whole week and I didn't once cry because of this, or, you know, I've learned a new tool that I'm put into place, and I was able to speak to my ex-husband and not have the fear come up again. So we celebrate those wins. And again, we all have a great friend group who love us, but until you walk this journey, it's so hard. So here you got people who are walking the same journey. We're being led by you, you're so wise in what you say and do, that why not join should be your question. Of course you should join. It's the place where you need to be to grow, to be who you want, who God knows you should be, and who you want to be.
Yes. And we're all Christian women. We all believe in Jesus. So we're very supportive that way. Like you said, it's a judgment-free zone. Nobody's at the wrong place, or nobody's not moving fast enough. We accept people exactly where they are, as they are. And that's so important. Well, maybe somebody's thinking, okay, but is this really worth the money or the time? Because I'm a busy person.
I believe we all have that. We're all busy. And I think, of course it is. You're worth the time and you're worth the money to do this. My pastor recently had this great analogy where he says, when you have a goldsmith and he's melting down the gold, or I guess the ore to make gold, he has to put it in high heat, obviously. And that's us. We're in high heat. And he goes, and then as the gold melts, impurities come up to the surface. And he very gently scrapes off the impurities, and it takes a long time. It's a long process. And then someone asks the goldsmith, when do you know you're ready? When you know the material is ready to be made into rings or jewelry? He goes, when I can look down on the melted gold and I can see my reflection, then I know they're ready. And what my pastor was saying is, when we are in the fire of the journeys that we're on, the trials, God is refining us, and he's scraping things off of us each time. And then soon we'll reflect him. And we can't do that without the help of those who have gone before us. And then to be able to help those behind us, it's a beautiful picture of what God wants us to do. But we have to be willing to be melted, and we have to be willing to be dredged, and then we'd be willing to be the reflection who God wants us to be.
Yeah.
And I think this type of community, this type of support group is exactly what we need as we move through that journey.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is about grit and perseverance. And so we need people to remind us, okay, maybe you hit a plateau right now, but keep on keeping on. And you see people at different stages of the growth, because the rebuild journey is 5 different stages of what we're talking about. Is give yourself time to grieve right now, but you still haven't rebuilt your life. So there's steps after that are so important. So any comments you'd like to add to people who are considering rebuild after divorce?
First of all, I'm sorry you're here. I'm really, truly, none of us raised our hand to be here, but I'm so grateful that Georgia's group, Rebuild, and all that we were learning is here for you to experience. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And again, like Georgia said, there's no judgment. There's only encouragement, and sometimes there's gentle nudging. I mean, we all need that gentle nudge to be moved into that next phase. I just find it, and again, you'll get out of it what you put into it. And so that first year, I wasn't prepared really. There was only so much I could do. This year, I'm getting more out of it because I'm a different person and I'm able to accept it. But also because there's the new people that have come in. I love that. I love when the new people come into the group and you see in their eyes that look that you had, maybe the year before or 2 years before, and it's okay. And you're there, you tell them it's okay. So to have somebody praying over you, loving you just where you are, and knowing you're not going to be there, you're not going to stay stuck there. You're going to be moving on, which is good. That's what you want. I think it's priceless. It's really, I don't see any reason why not to be part of this group.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. Just knowing people are ahead of you, people are where you are, maybe even some are just starting. It's not that we're going to rush through this journey, but you're not alone. And like you said, we pray for one another. We've seen answers. We've seen miracles in our group as we prayed for one.
We have. And, heartbreaking stories and so many of them. And you think, Lord, we know you're here. We know you're here. And like he says in 2 Corinthians, he said, when you go through trials and tribulations, when I have brought you through the fires, I want you to comfort those who I have comfort as I have comforted you. And I took that to heart. I mean, I love that. In fact, you mentioned rice and beans earlier. As I speak to some of the women on the street, 50 to 60% of the women I speak to are there because of domestic abuse. They were thrown out of their homes, divorces, and found themselves totally unprepared and unable to take care of themselves. And that's heartbreaking. So I don't know what it's like to be homeless, but I do know what it's like to lose security and to find myself in a different life. Yes, I have a bed to go home to, a home to go home to, I have a car, but I can connect with them in a certain way. And so that's why I think the Lord tells us, go out with what I've given you and done for you and comfort others. And maybe not exact story. Maybe you have a ministry that's similar, but not exact. Go there anyway, because what you have gone through and what we learn here at Rebuild is for us to share with others, not for us to keep to ourselves.
Good. Yes, and you're a perfect example. You know, your life was thrown upside down. Like you said, you were out there in the water. You had to go through the jungle, but you did get to the mountain, and now you're helping others.
Yeah, almost to the top. I think we got a little bit more to go. But if you notice about a mountain is as you go up a mountain, there's a lot less path options. And so the Lord has me a much smaller, narrow path because he knows I don't need those options. I'm got my eyes on him. So I'm hoping we're getting to the top of the mountain.
Yeah. Well, you're such an encouragement. And I just want to say thank you, Meg, for taking the time to share with others today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for asking me. And I say hi to all my friends watching. It's so funny. While we were talking, they're texting me saying, "Hey, we're watching you." I'm like, "Okay, stop texting me." But I love that.
Oh, yeah, that support. Well, and I just want to say that this will be on my Facebook Live, Georgia Shaffer, Shaffer, author page. And so you can still type in questions, and Meg and I will go back and look, and we can answer if you have any questions or comments about the journey, what it was like, or just asking for prayers for your journey that you're walking.
Got some garden questions. We're your girls that can talk to you about it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, again, thank you, and we'll sign off. But again, Meg, I do appreciate you giving your time.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my pleasure.